All right, Jill. So I live in Denver. We've got a big homelessness problem here. Okay. It's been really bad for maybe like 7 or 8 years. It seems to be getting worse. Tell me why it's not just laziness. Tell me what's really going on that's making homelessness a big problem.
Dude, laziness is the lazy answer. It's
Nice.
just,
Nice.
I mean, there's so much data around this that homelessness is actually a housing issue. It's not deep down an issue that has to do with mental health and substance abuse. Are those issues? Yes. Are they the driving factor? No.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's good. What gives you the authority to talk about these things?
Oh.
How do you have street cred to talk about people on the streets?
Well, I mean, not only have I been a pastor, like I've been interacting with homeless people, I've sat on boards that had to deal with panhandling issues in neighborhoods and urban environments, but I also served as a director of public affairs for a governmental agency that oversaw disabilities and mental health, and we worked with what's called affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, that helped get people off the streets and create a situation to to help people who are homeless, or we just call unhoused, uh, get into a stable environment. So I know all the data. There's a great book out there called "Homelessness is
Mm,
a Housing Issue." You should check it out. It's written by a couple of
yeah.
really well-known researchers and communicators, and they did all kinds of research and data across the American continent, in the major cities, counties. You can look at mental health, you can look at substance abuse, you can look at all kinds of different factors, but the primary driving factor is a lack of affordable housing. Period. It's just black and white. They use the illustration of musical chairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's enough chairs, everyone has a seat. But you take out some chairs, someone doesn't have a seat. And in our society, the people who don't have a seat are going to be the most vulnerable people. And these are not people who are just have mental health and substance abuse.
Yeah.
Go to the richest neighborhoods in your city in Denver, here in Dallas. They also have mental health issues, right? But they can afford to, they have insurance and can afford to go to a psychologist. They also have substance abuse issues, but they have families that will take them in and get them into programs or detox or whatever, those kinds of things. The network, the safety net that a lot of people end up on the streets, that's what makes them vulnerable. They don't have the backstop that helps them when they hit a rough patch, when they lose a job or something happens
Mm-hmm.
in their personal lives. That's what's happening. The issue is really they don't have access to affordable housing.
Well, you've just made me realize something I think is pretty interesting. And that is like in a lot of our conversations, we tend to look at the complexities in a situation, and like with homelessness, oftentimes I've thought, well, people need to see it as a complex issue. It's not just laziness, it's not just one thing. But what's funny, what's ironic, is in a sense what you're saying is it actually is more simple than you would think, just not in the way that you would think. Would you agree with
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss that these other factors aren't factors,
Sure.
because most people, you pass the eye test, you go, look, oh man, there's someone walking in the street who's clearly probably a schizophrenic, right? They have some
Right.
schizophrenia going on. Or you see someone who, and you just tell, oh man, they're addicted to drugs. But the argument there, I would say, is it the chicken or the egg? What brings on all these things? It is a
Sure.
traumatic experience to be on the streets day in, day out. You can't be in your prefrontal cortex. You are in
Right.
survival mode. You're in your reptilian brain. Any of us would be if we were put on the streets for an elongated period of time. That would have an impact on us, and we would likely turn to escape, like drugs, or we would likely begin, our mental health would begin to deteriorate. So what's causing that? Did they have it before and it led them to the streets, or did some circumstances lead them to the streets and this became exacerbated? So really, what there's a program called Housing First, and they talk about like what we have to do first for these people is get them into a stable environment where they can then deal with substance abuse, where they can then deal with mental health. Because if they don't have a stable environment, you can't deal with any of that shit. It's just going to ruin your life. And then you just have a bunch of people around going like, oh, they're lazy.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about Gabor Mate in his book, like The Myth of Normal, and one of the main points that he makes, not there but other places too, is like if you're living in a deeply messed up world and you're in an extremely difficult context, how can you be normal when you're in that context? Extremely difficult. Just expecting people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps is not really a solution. You do have to address the contextual um, uh, deficits when we're talking about social problems.
I think it's Martin Luther King who said, like, what do you do when you pull up? How can you pull up your own bootstraps when your boots don't have laces? Right. That's what we're
Right.
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.